This speech was a global speech. Self-esteem, self-confidence, self-reliance are the three critical words. The biggest point in that speech was that I am no longer the market, I am the supplier. The big oil energy players have been very, very keen to ensure that India does not explode. I don't care about people who are actually weaponizing territory. China. Countries which are withholding, weaponizing their resources, we know which country we're talking. We talk about countries which is weaponizing tariffs, we know which country we're talking about. This great nuclear deal on which the Manmohan Singh government was virtually falling apart. Nothing happened after that. He has to push the bureaucracy to really implement things on ground. The singular biggest point that the Modi foreign policy has done is reviving ties with the Middle East. You have three sets of interceptors, M1, M2, M3. The killer vehicle has been validated. It needs to be tested one more time.
You must have heard Prime Minister Modi's address to the nation, delivered from the ramparts of the Red Fort on Independence Day in some form. Shorts, reels, perhaps the transcript of the speech. It had something for everybody, from entrepreneurs to manufacturers, diplomats, most certainly the Aam Janta and the youth of the country, and even women, appealing the opposition to support and take credit for 33% reservation. The speech had some elements which were taken up by the opposition immediately after. For instance, the reference to those the Prime Minister chose to call Dimagi Naxals. Remember, the speech was delivered during times when Prime Minister Modi's government is facing some criticism on how it has been pursuing its foreign policy by the opposition as well. So on this episode of Point Blank, HT's executive editor, Shishir Gupta, will help us not just decode the Prime Minister's speech, but also help us figure out what's next. Because a lot of what the Prime Minister said will translate into policies of the government and its actions in various areas going forward. So let's get started. Good morning, sir. Thank you for taking up the time. Sir, a couple of days after, the Prime Minister delivered a speech which, of course, should have been a regular affair because at the end of the day, Independence Day speeches have been delivered by multiple Prime Ministers. But if you look at the background, there's a lot happening in the country, and the Prime Minister tried to have all of those elements in his speech, address some of the concerns, and of course also talk about the future trajectory that he wants India to be on. So first of all, before anything else, before we talk about specific things, just your thoughts on the Prime Minister's speech, sir.
See, this was the 13th speech of the Prime Minister from the ramparts of the Red Fort. To my understanding, the past 12 speeches had a lot of domestic content. It was addressed towards the domestic audience and how that he is going to, take care of things domestically. But this speech was very special. Let me say that to you. This speech was a global speech. If you look at three things that he talks about. First of all, he says self-esteem, self-confidence, self-reliance are the three critical words in the speech, right? Now, to that, he adds what is required. Semiconductors, critical minerals, energy. In energy, he bifurcates into nuclear energy and obviously exploration. Now, if you look at the entire thing, he talks about semiconductors from 3 plants to 8 plants. Yeah. He talks about critical minerals, which he is talking to, having joint ventures with other countries, talking to other countries and trying to sort of, get critical minerals and which are the key components. And then he talks about exploration from no-go areas to all-go areas. And that had been held back for various reasons, whether it was no objection certificates from the Defense Ministry or from the Armed Forces or from the environment thing.
Yeah.
But I'll just take you back about 15 years ago. The then Petroleum Minister had said that at least 39 of blocks were being held because of no-go exploration. So he has actually opened the entire thing up, right? Similarly, he has talked about having Atmanirbhar Bharat in defense, and he's pushed it in a major way. The biggest point in that speech was that I am no longer the market, I am the supplier. Okay? And what is happening in the past, which people don't talk about, is that people normally were very happy to purchase from abroad because it had everything in it. People used to get cuts. There were other things that were happening, and they were more than happy to do it. So today we have reached a stage where we have a huge deficit with China because people don't want to manufacture in India. But there are some other reasons also in that. But the fact remains is that you opened exploration. Once you opened exploration, you have a possibility of more oil and gas coming in, right? If Kane could get oil in Badmer, and Russians could discover on Bombay High, then and Reliance could discover in KG down 6. So many places you can come up with this. And once that happens, you have an option. You don't need to import that much. And what is happening over the years is these big players, the big oil energy players, have been very, very keen to ensure that India does not explore. It is the same way that the Indian defense sector should not grow because the big players don't want them. They want only to export to India. And that has various other connotations. That means that, if something happens, these people can always hold back their hands. He talks about the three things. Then he talks about, what is to be done in these three parts, that is semiconductors, critical minerals, and energy, right? And then he defines it as to what he calls as a saptadhara. Now, that has been also done in a very beautiful phrase, because at a time when Pakistan wants to claim the Indus Valley civilization, he talks about a Sapt-Sindhu. So he talks about Sindhu Saraswati civilization. Yeah. So it's done very cleverly. It's not a simple speech. It is a speech which actually defines the roadmap for India if India wants to be not a developed country, but a global power. This speech also tells people that I am going to pursue independent foreign policy. I don't care about people who are actually weaponizing territory. We know what we are talking about. China. Countries which are withholding, weaponizing their resources. We know which country we're talking. We talk about countries which is weaponizing tariffs. We know which country we're talking about. So it's a speech to everybody saying that, listen, I am going to go on my independent path. I am going to go my way. And I will no longer be purely a consumer. I will supply. And for that, he's talked about startups. He talks about the youth. He talks about, the energy, for instance. You have a nuclear deal, which was done in 2005, right? Today, there is hardly a single megawatt of nuclear energy that has been added. So he talks about new plants, right? So this great nuclear deal on which the Manmohan Singh government was virtually falling apart, nothing happened after that, right? We just made song and dance about it. We talked about politics of it. We talked about, various elements of it, left, right, center, everybody getting into it, but we didn't get anything out of it. Yeah. So now we are talking in terms of new nuclear plants after the Shanti Act. He's prepared the ground. Now he's willing to move forward. And for that, he requires a lot of reforms. Today, the thing is, the politician is accountable after every 5 years. But the bureaucracy is accountable only 1 in 35 years. That is the time when he clears the exam. He or she clears the exam. After which, it's my way. So he has to push the bureaucracy to really implement things on ground. It's very easy to say that, the politicians are this and the politicians are, they are corrupt and they are doing this. But at least the guy is accountable after every 5 years. Here is this guy who's not going to be accountable at all once he clears the exam. Right. Once Dholpur House gives him clearance, he's all there. Yeah. So we have to push that. And for that, he has to reduce the cost of doing business in India, which is the most critical thing. It's not the ease of doing business, it's the cost of doing business, because it's very difficult for a businessman to do business in India, considering that from commissioner to constable, everybody is out to take the cut. And this becomes very, very serious when you go to the states. It's a speech. It's actually a path to a superpower. And he has made it very clear that he is going to have an independent foreign policy, an independent way of looking at things. and he will not be pressurized. And that's why the speech is a milestone speech in many ways.
Okay. Okay. So, for those who are, of course, looking to find out the highlights of Prime Minister's speech, I think that comprehensive response that you just gave us will suffice. But now let's start talking about, some of the specific issues, and one of them being, of course, a foreign policy, because Modi government's foreign policy has come under considerable criticism from the opposition. It's been said that yes, of course, Prime Minister Modi, goes to various countries and has personal relationship in the sense that rapport shows on screens when he hugs, various nation heads. But in some of what we have seen in the past, that itself has been questioned. The way Prime Minister Modi approaches the relationship with, other nation heads, and Prime Minister Modi, the way several countries, especially in India's neighborhood, for example, let's take Bangladesh for that matter, have been alienated or are feeling alienated. So opposition has been pointing out all of these issues. What do you think about the sort of response that the Prime Minister had for the opposition, which has been criticizing his foreign policy?
See, during the monsoon session, there were two things that happened. First was they wanted to put the Home Minister Amit Shah on the mat over the so-called police excesses during this demonstration that took place. And they tried to push that out, and they continued to put pressure on the government. Then suddenly they talked about Modi's foreign policy, and they took pot shots at sort of his hugging various heads of state and so on and so forth. So there were these 2 points. Now opposition obviously will do what an opposition does. It will oppose everything. So there is nothing new in that. Now the fact remains is that Modi's foreign policy has been a very vibrant foreign policy. It is a foreign policy of a country which practices strategic autonomy. For instance, the singular biggest point that the Modi foreign policy has done is reviving ties with the Middle East. Today, one of your closest allies is UAE. And let me remind you that when IC-814 hijack took place, your ambassador was not even allowed to get inside the airport. This is what he has done. You see, he has actually taken the foreign policy to a different level, where no longer we are sitting on the side table. We are sitting on the global table, and we count on everything. Be it human disaster relief, whether it be it in Colombia, whether it be it any place, Uruguay, China, anywhere.
Turkey for that matter.
Even Turkey, any place, Nepal, anywhere, Maldives, we are there, right? And we don't wait for anybody. We are the first responders. When was the last time such a thing happened? You can make fun of his, trying to hug the heads of state, but the fact remains is that today you're no longer on the inside pages of the newspaper, whether it is anywhere in the world. I mean, the man has made it very clear that wherever he wants to exercise his charm, he does that. And wherever he has to be very stern about things, he does that. Now, be it with China, be it with Pakistan, be it with any country, he's very clear as to what he wants to communicate. And this is one way of his communication. That's where it is. Okay? Let me also tell you something else. When President Donald Trump, in his first tenure, heard that the Prime Minister was doing Howdy Modi in Houston, he told his aides that he wants to join that function. When was the last time any US president said that? So let's be very clear on what he has done to the foreign policy and what External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has done to the foreign policy, and how the foreign policy is being handled in the Middle East by the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, also in the neighborhood. So, right now the world is topsy-turvy. There is a Ukraine war, there is a Gaza war, there is a Middle East war, there is China aggression, the world is really in a very turbulent phase. And in a turbulent phase world, things do happen. You have to always be nimble-footed. Now to say that, Bangladesh, well, the government changed. Now, do you want India to intervene in that? We are talking to that government. Similarly, in Nepal. Similarly, Sri Lanka, we gave money to Sri Lanka, we gave money to Maldives. So, it's all very fine for the opposition to say what they want to say, because they are the opposition and they have all right to do that. But the facts are very, very different on ground. And you can make fun of the man, but the fact remains is everybody knows what he's all about. Similarly, they would wanted to pin down Amit Shah on the entire issue. I mean, the man has, you couldn't even change your IPC, CRPC for the past 80 years, for God's sakes. Come on. What happened to your LWE? I mean, remember when General V.K. Singh wrote in his book that Home Minister P. Chidambaram wanted him to use army against Naxals? Have you forgotten all that? So, I mean, it's fine. The opposition has to say what it wants to say. Then there were these so-called, people wanted to sort of denigrate the Prime Minister, abuse the Prime Minister and so on. But there is obviously a politics in it. The politics in this is very simple. BJP winning the West Bengal election has actually shattered all these opposition parties because that was the state which had a huge 30% of minority vote. Despite that, BJP won hands down. Now, if you look at the next phase of elections which are coming in, UP is coming in. Punjab is coming in. Punjab, the government is jittery, right? Himachal is coming in. Government is jittery, right? There is Goa, Uttarakhand. So there are these elections which are coming in, which have about nearly 150 Lok Sabha seats in that. UP is the critical one. And these people, particularly Congress, AAP, will be also tested in their own states. And it's not looking good. So you have to create discontent. You have to create grievances. You have to sort of create that everybody gets into the politics of it. You can talk about caste, you can talk about foreign policy, you can talk about China, you can talk about anybody. So this is what it is. So it's pure politics it is. But the Prime Minister in his speech has not talked about politics. He's talked about a roadmap, an architecture where things have to be delivered in that way. And he's talked about the think big rather than getting into the caste model. So the opposition will do what the opposition does. But as long as the opposition does not have a vision, a future vision of India, it will be very difficult for them just to survive on social media.
Now, do you think this speech could address some of the issues which we saw being raised in the context of youth? Of course, the CJP protest and then, of course, the march that we saw. So the speech had a lot for the youth and women as well. But before we talk about women, let's just talk briefly about, do you think the Prime Minister in his speech could address some of the concerns that we saw being raised? And of course, perhaps a roadmap for the youth of the country as well, in the sense that, in terms of jobs, in terms of opportunities, and of course, here self-reliance but also comes in, because India at this point in time, if you look at a city like Bengaluru and some of the other places, you're seeing a lot of startups coming up, right? And doing fabulous work, because every single day you open X, you see India's testing this rocket engine, India's testing that fusion, plant. There is so much happening in that space. So from the point of view of youth, what all did you see in that speech?
See, the biggest thing that, this country is now doing is the startups. Okay, you talked about it. Let me tell you that, while we see, a whole lot of, negative content, trying to pull people down, but it is the startup ecosystem which has come up in a huge way. I mean, the defense startups are to be sort of seen to be believed. I mean, there have been startups on drones which are sort of really, really going in a different way. Yeah. Startups are attracting a huge talent. I mean, from making rockets to missiles to kamikaze drones to, aircraft systems. I mean, it's a different world altogether. And that world exists.
Yeah.
It's not a world that is existing only in social media. See, the fact remains is that, if you look at the 2024 elections, 30% of the vote, or more than 30% of the vote, went to the opposition party. So opposition parties do have their own pockets. So they will be discontent. But what is happening in the startup world is something very important. When he talks about improving the energy requirement, pushing the energy from nuclear energy, solar energy, basically to fuel the AI system. Because AI requires a lot of energy, so he's talking about that. He's talking about, free giving tuition. So he's addressed the youth, but youth today, the productive youth today, let me put it that way, he is really pressing hard on the accelerator, because these are people who have come from abroad and they're coming back to India after the great President Donald Trump created all sorts of H-1B problems. All of these people are coming in India and then they're surviving. surviving despite the bureaucracy. Let me say that to you, right? Surviving despite the corruption in the states. They are doing that, and it is coming in a huge way. If you look at the various things they are going into, bioeconomy, generics, they are there. They are just spread all over the place, and they're growing in size. So it's not something that I'm dreaming about. This is what is happening on ground.
And interestingly, once again, Prime Minister made an appeal to the opposition to support the women's reservation bill. Hasn't happened yet. Why do you think Prime Minister continues to make this appeal to the opposition? I mean, the government can summon the numbers, right, and pass the bill. But the Prime Minister is talking about participation of the opposition as well, asking them to share credit and so on. So, what's behind this way of phrasing this appeal to the opposition?
He basically, like the FCRA bill, he basically wants a consensus, so that it says that it took into account the opposition's concerns and then decided to do that. I mean, he can push it through. He has the numbers. He had the numbers to push through the FCRA bill, but he did not do that. So he's very clear. He wants to take consensus of the opposition. And now the thing is that he wants to take their concerns, and that's where can be addressed into the various committees and then push the thing. He is very clear on delimitation. Believe you me, this will happen, right? He is making it very clear to you. All he is saying is come on board, so that we project a joint picture in that. That's what it is all about. And he's been saying many things, and he wants the opposition to join hands. It's for the opposition to decide exactly what they want to do, right? I mean, they can play fun and games, it's fine. But as long as he's leading them with his own vision and they do not have an alternative plan, it'll be very difficult for opposition to sort of really put him down.
Another critical element there was, of course, this element of self-defense, where the Prime Minister talked about, building multiple layers of, India's air defense. And he made this speech in 2025 as well. It had some reference to it. So if you can talk about that, how crucial that is from India's point of view, because self-reliance in defense, is a very important thing for a country like India, which has enemies or, not so friendly forces on multiple borders.
For India to grow, India needs to be self-reliant in defense. India cannot look at a third country to supply and decide when it wants to supply and when it doesn't want to supply. Particularly at a time when we are into what is called standoff wars. It's basically purely missiles and drones. And you can be targeted through cyber attacks. This, you have to ensure that you build firewalls in all the places. So here the Prime Minister talks about cybersecurity, he talks about firewalls, he talks about various things. But the key to the entire thing is how to protect India from enemy ballistic missiles. That is where he talks about mission Sudarshan Chakra, and he's talked about last year. Now in that, what has happened is, let me tell you, that's moving very rapidly. Now what has happened is you have 3 sets of interceptors, M1, M2, M3. They can be named later at whatever they want. So you're looking from, which is basically 100 kilometers to 400 kilometers of interceptors. Now let me tell you, the M1 has been tested on July 23rd, 2026, the first one. Now my understanding is that one more test will happen to sort of ensure that the killer vehicle, which basically neutralizes the incoming ballistic missile, is validated. Once that happens, and that test is going to come very soon, it can come in 2 months, 3 months. Once that happens, what you do is, all you have to do is, you have to put more boosters on the same killer vehicle.
To extend the range.
To extend the range. So within 1 year, you will have M1, M2, M3. And then you can look at the warhead, what kind of warhead he wants to have. But the killer vehicle has been validated. It needs to be tested one more time. And that is what is Project Kusha. Now that integrates into the S-400 systems, integrate into the Barak systems, next generation. Then separately work is going on the BrahMos next generation, 800 kilometers. So a whole lot of activity is happening. Similarly, a whole lot of activity which remains under the classified domain is happening in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. I mean, these are things I can't talk about it, but you will soon see how we will be able to have huge leverage in our backyard, that is the Bay of Bengal, right? people know about it. Those who know about it know what is happening over there. So he has actually spelled out exactly what he wants over there. But what is very important is that, India becomes a supplier of defense. Even today, the Defense Secretary Rajesh Kumar Singh is in Armenia. He's gone there to ensure that, the Armenian defense is there. And we know who Armenia is fighting. So what is happening is that he has spelled out what is the requirement, but the priority over here is, first you have to make your country secure. How do you make a country secure? Is by having a good anti-ballistic missile defense, and then something separately can follow.
Yeah.
This is what it is all about.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, Reliance just signed, an agreement wherein they'll be exploring the possibility of developing a fighter jet engine with Rolls-Royce, right? So there is a lot happening.
In that particular point, I just want to clarify on that.
Sure.
See, what has happened is that Reliance is tying up with Rolls-Royce, and the GTRE, the DRDO GTRE is tying up with Safran. That proposal is with the Cabinet Committee on Security, and that was supposed to be cleared, but it will be cleared subsequently. Now, here there is an issue in this. What happens is that Rolls-Royce has a whole lot of US components, and Rolls-Royce is actually integrated with the US defense aircraft systems. US always has a penchant for sort of, turning off the tap.
Some sort of a kill switch, yeah.
So we can't, a country like India cannot solely depend on Reliance, which decided to, switch off its petrol pump when the prices went high. And on Rolls-Royce, we're dependent on US. We need to have our own sovereign engine. The sovereign engine can only come through the Safran GTRE effort, because France is a power which is very close to India and has proven in the past. Even after India was made a nuclear pariah after the 1998 test, France continued to supply inertial navigation global positioning systems for our Prithvi missiles. So remember one thing, a sovereign engine is the requirement. I mean, private sector can play whatever. I mean, they can be a Rolls-Royce tie-up, they can be a tie-up with any other, they can be a sort of GE tie-up. So, but the fact remains is what you need is a sovereign engine.
And Kaveri coming along, Kaveri's come a long way as well.
Yes, Kaveri, they're pushing it, they're pushing the thrust factor. So let's see where it is.
And now, before I wrap up, one last question to you, and this one's political. Political because, the reference was clearly made by the Prime Minister in his speech. He used the phrase Dimagi Naxal. And of course, that was picked up by the opposition. And what do you make of that? What do you make of what the Prime Minister was trying to say when he used this phrase? And of course, the criticism of that by the opposition.
See, opposition has just picked on that word to say that, everybody is a Dimagi Naxal. No, he was actually being very specific for those who have Maoist ideology, who basically want to bring in a revolution. I mean, that's exactly what the Marxist, Leninist, ideology was all about. And that is what is referred to as Dimagi Naxal. These are essentially overground Maoists who've been operating in various systems, intellectual systems, be it in media, be it in universities, be it in government. These are people who are there. So he basically talks about isolating those people because they are being a hurdle to the development and progress of the country. That's what he's talked about. He's not named opposition as Dimagi Naxal. He's talked about a particular brand of people who have decided, who want to bring in a so-called revolution and try and overthrow the government. That's exactly what the Mao strategy was. Now, in that, the whole thing is that, he is basically saying that this Dimagi Naxal, which suffers from, what is called the, contrarian disorder, or the CCT, everything, they find negativity in everything. I mean, they can be pro-US, they can be pro-China, they can be pro-Russia, but they'll never be pro-India. These are people who actually question everything that is happening in India. It's a negative thought. It's a negative process. It is those he's talking to isolate. It's the Maoist ideology he's talking about isolation. He's not named other opposition leaders for that. I mean, they can sort of make politics out of it. But at the end of the day, till such time, you do not have an alternative vision, these things will not work. Okay? Instagram does not win you elections.
But on that note, thank you so much for taking out the time and coming to the HT studio and recording this episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.